All right, we are live. Yep, everybody can hear us.
All right.
Can I just do a quick sound check? Councilmember Peter Shagan, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
And do we have Councilmember Tatchett?
Yep, Councilmember Tajik, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys.
Great.
All right, great. Sounds like we have everybody here. So it's 6 o'clock. And it is April 12th, 2022. We are going to do a city council meeting for the city of Lake Stevens tonight. And I would call this meeting to order and ask everyone to rise for the pledge of allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, great. Clerk Schellen, can you give us a roll call?
Councilmember Daughtry,
I'm present.
Councilmember Peter Shagan,
Present?
Councilmember Frederick,
Present.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Present.
Councilmember Jorstad,
Present.
Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
Councilmember Tajik.
Present.
All right, great. And Council President, can we get an agenda?
Sick. Any change to the agenda as written?
I'm going to approve the agenda as written.
We do need to add an executive session tonight at the end of the meeting for property acquisition and potential litigation. I sent you, some of you, a link that online, a Teams link for that at the end. Of the
Yes, I saw that.
I'm going to propose the agenda with the executive session added.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any oppose? All right, Mayor, you have an agenda.
Excellent. My next agenda item, I'm just excited about this. It was a surprise. We're going to have Doug Levy up here for our legislative debrief. And the surprise was we've been seeing Doug forever on Zoom, and it's great to see him in person here. And it kind of made me happy. So with that, Doug, we're going to give you the floor for a debrief.
Mr. Mayor, what would you like?
You can go right up there.
And good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members and staff and audience and everybody. It's kind of fun to be back in person before you. And thanks, Councilmember Jorstad, for coming up and saying hi. So I had the assignment of coming before you and just giving you a debrief on the 2022 session of the legislature. So we have a PowerPoint we'll go through, and then please, the floor will be open for all of you to ask any questions you would like. So obviously there's our page. I think we nailed down the fact that we're going to be reporting on the legislature. So next slide, please.
Try it. A little bit of a lag there. There it is.
Hey, there we go. Okay. So this just goes to the conversation we were just having about virtual versus in person. We had assumed after the 2021 long session of the legislature that we were going to transition into person to person, and we were wrong about that. You know, with some of the Delta and Omicron variants of the coronavirus, the legislature ended up largely virtual for the 60-day 2022. And then I'm going to tease out, I think, a few of the big headlines the legislature had to work with. One that, you know, you may remember right after COVID-19 hit and there were all the shutdowns, there was the assumption that we were going to go into a several billion-dollar type of deficit in the state's operating budget, and that had happened originally, but obviously buoyed by, you know, the tech sector, the real estate market, you know, people coming out and wanting to buy things, you know, the real surge in online traffic. The state's operating budget heading into 2022 had never been in a better place, frankly, for quite some time. So almost an unprecedented level of money coming into the operating budget. When you looked at the 4-year outlook, about a $12 billion difference from when the pandemic first hit to when they came into the 2022 session. And so we'll talk about this throughout, but the legislature actually used the operating budget to help finance the Move Ahead Washington transportation package, for example. They put a lot of money into affordable housing. They put $650 million into the capital budget. They did put a couple $2 billion in reserves. Obviously, one of the debate points was that the minority Republicans in the legislature felt that there should have been more put aside and more across the board tax relief back to the public. So obviously, depending on your viewpoint, good idea, bad idea. I think no matter what your viewpoint, we could say it was a very activist session of the legislature. They passed 303 bills to the governor. That's akin to the type of activity you would see in a longer session. The governor vetoed half a dozen of those. He did partial vetoes to a dozen bills. So almost 300 bills enacted from the session. And then I think major budget and policy initiatives, things that were in front of them that I'll just tick off here. I mentioned Move Ahead Washington. We'll get into that more as we go along, but a different kind of transportation package for a lot of reasons. The way it was funded, the makeup of the package, and the size of the package, frankly, 16 years, $16.9 billion. Very significant development in even numbered election year. And then I talked about the fact that there were a lot of investments in affordable housing, over $500 million worth of those. And you may remember the legislature came into the 2022 session. There was a lot of controversy around a previously enacted Washington long-term care trust that people were going to pay into. I think a lot of concern over how that was going to work. People having trouble getting coverage on the private market if they wanted alternative coverage. Folks who might have been paying in for a couple of years and then retired were still obligated to do so. They may have moved to another state. I think there was still an expectation of paying into the trust. So the governor and the legislature, you sort of hit the timeout sign and said, we've got to recalibrate a lot of this. And they passed 2 bills within the first 2 weeks to put an 18-month hold on the start of the program and to add some exemptions for folks depending on their circumstances. Another major development within the session, some bills around gun safety, both for high capacity magazines and for bringing weapons into public places in an open carry fashion. Those were 2 bills the legislature passed. And then we'll get into this as part of our priorities, but several important clarifications of policing reform bills that have been passed in the 2021 session. I want to, we'll get into thank yous more later, but the mayor and the chief were both very active as we worked on those. And then a major commitment on behavioral mental health and several climate bills that I've listed here. So let's go to the next slide. So sort of on a now kind of weaving into the big picture for cities and local governments, I'd say nearly all pretty positive. I'll get into a couple of bumps in the road, but the operating budget made sure that it was going to pass through what are known as state shared revenues to cities and counties, and a little bit of an upward tick from where we'd been a year before. Excise tax distributions for liquor that goes to all cities and counties, that's going to be up around 11 million above what it had been. A little over $5 million increase in the marijuana excise tax distributions to cities and counties. The legislature granted some money down to local governments for Growth Management Act assistance, utility assistance, which isn't as direct an issue for you all, and then several good streams of funding for local public safety needs. I mentioned again several of the policing reform bills were clarified. I'll name those in just a moment. So on the transportation package, I think if you were talking about major corridor needs or finishing major corridors like a US 2 or a Highway 18 or an Interstate 405, you may have felt very good about the Move Ahead Washington package. Transit and bicycle pedestrian needs, historic levels of funding in that package, about $1.3 billion. But I think our friends within the Association of Washington Cities took away some disappointment, frankly. You may remember that when the legislature was building what became Move Ahead Washington, they trotted out a fairly controversial export fuel tax. And that brought out a lot of opposition from neighboring states like Oregon and Idaho and Alaska, and something I've never seen, members of the Oregon legislature coming to the Washington legislature to testify against something. I've been kicking around a while, I've never seen that one. So ultimately, the transportation leaders threw the export fuel tax overboard, but that was about a $2 billion part of their package. So they then scrambled to find other ways to finance it. They looked at a diversion of the Public Works Assistance Account, which is low interest loans for local governments for a variety of things. You're fortunate in Lake Stevenson that that's not really a fund you've tapped very often at all. But for some smaller cities, and I would say particularly smaller cities in areas like Eastern Washington, that's something they are very reliant on. So it started as a $100 million a year diversion from that account. In the final package, it was $57 million a year. But, amidst a lot of good things in Move Ahead Washington, a lot of things we testified in strong support of, just know that there was some concerns about some of the way the final financing was put in place. And I think candidly, as you all have discussions like the ones you're going to be having over the next several months about a transportation benefit district, the legislature didn't do a lot of direct money to locals for maintenance and operation and just keeping up the system. There's about $80 million that'll flow through the Transportation Improvement Board over 16 years. So I guess what I'm saying here is that that whole discussion you're about to have becomes even more relevant. The self-sufficiency issue on taking care of local roadways and that last mile that we all provide for people to get to where they need to go. The legislature also on a global basis had a very robust capital budget. And again, $650 million moved over from the operating budget largely to buy things on the affordable housing side and somewhat on broadband. We had a disappointment there that I'll talk about when we get to our priorities. And then you always go into these sessions of the legislature, you want to make sure not only that you're making progress where you can, but that you're not taking any steps backward and getting hit with a 2x4 on the side of the head. We avoided any of those very problematic bills. There were some that were out there. Things like mandates for how you design what's called missing middle housing across all single family lots. But that bill didn't pass, and in its place, a more flexible grant program did in the operating budget. So next slide, please. You never come out of these sessions feeling everything went swimmingly. I mentioned that largely a positive session for us, for cities and local governments in general. But I think if I were to identify a few things, we're continuing to see, I think, the last several sessions where legislators who are very eager to make change in terms of promoting housing density around the state, and particularly in areas that have been slow to accept density, I think have been reaching a little bit too quickly for bills that mandate and prescribe versus giving you all what we think is the right avenue, which is flexibility at the local level to get those things done. So that continues to be a source of concern. And even with very robust budgets, there weren't a lot of direct revenue tools given to any of you or across the board relief. So, there have been efforts by local governments over the last several years to re-examine, for example, the 1% property tax limit. Obviously, that's a very controversial topic, but for local governments, when you put a budget together, you're dealing with a 1% limit on one side and inflationary increases on the other. So nothing very seriously considered there. And we'll talk about a bill that we put out there and that the mayor testified to on the way the whole marijuana excise tax system is set up. That did not pass, although we started an important conversation. And then as I talked about with the transportation package, very high centered on state infrastructure needs. And in a lot of ways, that's a good thing, but not a lot of direct help for local. And I've linked here, AWC kind of gave you their pro and con for the session. You can take a look at that for yourselves. Next slide, please. So let's get parochial here if we can, and just take a look at Lake Stevens. Just waiting for this slide to come up for you. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started and hopefully we'll be able to advance it. So we had on our priority list, I'm just going through our list that you saw in my weekly report as I gave you progress updates. One of the first things we had was actively supporting passage of a transportation revenue package during the 2022 session. And as we've talked about, that came to pass and very good on a lot of fronts, which you'll see as we go through our individual priorities. On the transportation project side, we've held as a top priority for years that we need to make substantial progress on the US 2 trestle. And the legislature allocated $210.5 million toward the trestle, one of the largest line items for projects in the package. Now, in previous years, when they were talking about packages, never quite got there, and Senator Hobbs was sitting where he was as a Senate Transportation Chair, the numbers were bigger. The problem was the package never got done. So even though this isn't, the money to do everything and build everything with respect to the trestle and replacing the structure, I think $210.5 million tells you that there's a commitment to get it done. And the next time the legislature comes back, I think we in Everett and Snohomish County and others will be very well positioned to get that the rest of the way there. On the project side as well, we had put forward 3 local projects, 20th and Main, and the roundabout needs there, phase 2 of the South Lake Stevens Road multi-use trail, and then that connection between 16th and Centennial Trail. And 2 of those got funded, both South Lake Stevens and 16th and Centennial. So $5.5 million of investment there, and really one of the few local communities to get a couple of local projects funded versus just one. So we were very pleased with that. And I want to just give a shout out to Council President Ewing, the mayor, Russ, and the staff work that he and Aaron did. Those things don't come along in a silo, and of course help from your legislators to get that done. We also had as a priority getting as much direct distribution of new funds and increased grant program and local option funding as we could. I would say that's a little more on the mixed side. As I shared with you, some additional local money, a local option on transportation benefit districts that allows jurisdictions to go up to 0.3 cents sales tax with voter approval. Current law had been 0.2. So those things were in the package. And there's also some language, and we can talk about that if you'd like after we go into Q&A around the use of traffic safety cameras, some broader authority for cities and counties there. One disappointment in terms of our priorities on the quality of life side, we spent a lot of time on a $250,000 request with the Cedarwood Clubhouse and getting immediately at some emergency repairs of the roof and siding there. And we had a lot of support for it. It was turned in as a budget request. We testified in strong support of it. In the end, I think partly due to the fact that Lake Stevens had been in the 44th district, was trending toward being in the 39th next year. The legislature and the chairs working with the 44th district members looked at putting money in some areas that will remain in the 44th. I'm not going to sugarcoat it with you. I felt like you had a very good project. I'm disappointed it wasn't in the 2022 capital budget. We've been fortunate to be very successful on our capital requests over the years. I do think you're in a very good place for 23-25 on that project. On the public safety side, I think we can feel very good about how things went. We were very engaged in bills to better enable police to deal with, for example, those trying to flee a crime scene. That's what we call Terry stops is the legal case on that one. And the legislature passed House Bill 2037 to make a fix there. They passed another bill, House Bill 1735, to allow police to carry out community caretaking functions and apprehend those who are in mental health crisis. They passed a bill, House Bill 1719, on the use of non-lethal munitions like beanbag rounds. So some good things to sort of recalibrate policing reform bills from the 2021 session. And I should add that we supported many of the 2021 bills and still do, but there were a few unintended consequences that got fixed in 2022. One we had supported and we had hoped the legislature would do died on the Senate calendar the last night, and that was sort of recalibrating and fixing some of the ways that vehicle pursuits for police are done. And similar to the House Bill 2037, that bill was intended to do some remedying of the 2021 bills. That did not pass. And then we had brought forward to Representative and then Senator Lubbock a bill on doxing and trying to get some fix in the law on maliciously victimizing folks over the internet. A partial victory there in that the legislature passed a bill, Senate Bill 5628, that has new restrictions on cyber harassment. So that was good progress. And I alluded to this earlier, but also on our fiscal flexibility side, we brought forward an idea about local option excise tax for jurisdictions of 50,000 and below that could be used to better help them incentivize marijuana producers and processors. And we did get a hearing on that bill, which was sponsored by Representative Wicks. It did not, however, move out of the Finance Committee. We had a lot of folks within the marijuana sector opposed to that bill. So again, felt like we helped stimulate a good conversation. I think we were one of the forces that helped the legislature decide to bump up the overall level of excise tax distribution, but the singular bill did not pass. So next slide, if we could. So I've been dancing around this one, but I just very directly want to thank so many of you. Mr. Mayor, you were a frequent testifier, Council President Ewing. I omitted this in writing, and I think we have Councilmember Peterson on a Zoom screen with us, but he did a great job on a weekend, no less, testifying with concerns about that missing middle bill that I had alluded to. Councilmember Dickinson trying to help us down the home stretch on calls to our members on our capital budget requests. So I was just delighted at the way so many of you jumped in, and can't say enough about the staff and all the work they did to review bills. I still feel bad about all the bills I throw at Russ writing it. He He continually has a good attitude. Gives me feedback on it, so. And then our legislators, in these reports, I don't single out members, but I can assure you that our members from the 44th district, and frankly, our soon-to-be members from the 39th district, many of them chipped in to help on some of these bills and others that helped us. And I mentioned staff. So this stuff is always a team effort. You know, you send me down there as your boots on the ground, but we don't get good stuff done if we don't have a lot of us chipping in. So let me, last slide, please, if we could advance. Let me just flag a few things to look ahead toward and trends. I mentioned redistricting. The Redistricting Commission Map takes Lake Stevens from what had been the 44th district. It will now be, I believe, the biggest city in the 39th district. So you will be in a new legislative district come January, and those members running for the 39th district will be campaigning on representing you in the future. So that's an important sea change. I think we're going to see a very competitive election cycle. It's a between presidential years cycle, 2022, and if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say we will see the House of Representatives tighten up a little bit. It's 57 Democrats, 41 Republicans right now. Maybe a little less fundamental change in the Senate, where it's 28 Democrats, 21 Republicans. But all House seats are up in the fall. We'll see very competitive races there, and a whole variety of Senate seats too. So. And then I think it's important to know that there are going to be a lot of new faces in the legislature, no matter what, just through retirements. Pat Sullivan, who's from down in South King County, the House Majority Leader, has been in that place for well over a decade. He's been in the legislature for over 2 decades. He's retiring. So is Representative Mike Sells, who is in the district next door in the 38. So is a newer member of the 38, Representative Emily Wicks, for different reasons, looking to get some of her personal life back. And there are a series more retirements. So that'll change the composition of the legislature as well. And then I mentioned funding opportunities. I'll go through and do a much more comprehensive report back to you all on the session and what passed and what didn't and what funding opportunities are there. And those are the types of things we'll want to go over with the mayor and staff in particular, so that we know what we should be evaluating at least. And then we're already jumping from, the state legislature to the federal government, and met with Congresswoman Del Bene's staff today. And the city is handing in a series of federal funding submittals, 20th and Main, Cedarwood, I mentioned, 36th Street Bridge. I think we have 5 altogether that we're submitting to Congresswoman Del Bene and then our 2 US senators as they start up. We used to call it earmarking. We're not supposed to call it that anymore, but from 2010 to 21, there wasn't that in Congress. And now you need to call it community project funding if you're talking to your US House members, or congressionally directed spending if you're talking to your senators. Nonetheless, we'll be working on all those and hope we do okay there. I mentioned the comprehensive session report. And then last thing is, the clock doesn't stop just because the legislature has. I'm here as you need me, and happy to take part in meetings where you see my presence adding value. And I know there will continue to be a lot of those. And I just want to again thank the mayor and Jean, the staff, and all of you. And always a pleasure serving this community and seeing all the great progress that's happening. And let me shut up and take any questions you may have.
Council, anybody?
No question, just hooray. Hooray, Doug Levy.
A little clarification on the open carry. The general statement is in public, but that's not really accurate. It's in public venues like council meetings, board, or
Right.
school
Right.
board
Public
meetings,
meetings.
and at the legislature. Is that the only areas?
Yeah, Councilmember Daughtry, that's right. I had more correctly stated it in writing, and maybe I shorthanded it a little loosely and verbally, but it's for open carry in places where public meetings are being held by governmental agencies.
Okay.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, we've had troubles in the past with open carry off the fence, so there's nothing you can do about it because it's lawful, so.
Councilmember Dorset.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts as we transition from the 44th to the 39th. In terms of timing and the importance of kind of forging those relationships with our new representatives and senator, given that this is an election year for a few of them, do you think it makes sense for us to reach out now and start having conversations with those representatives? Or does it make more sense to wait until after November? Or curious to know your thoughts.
I actually think yes and yes. And I know, the mayor's already toured Senator Wagner and Representative Eslick around the community. So you got a little bit of a leg up there. But I think for any of you that have those relationships, just saying, hey, I know we're not officially in your district until Jan 1, but love to go get a cup of coffee with you. I think building those relationships informally and then maybe coming back a little more formally later in the year is a good thing. I would say too, I have a general rule I follow with the legislators. They are so besieged and so nagged for months at a time. I usually try and have a 6-week timeout period with them. So, but you all are, I think, are in a better place there with some of your relationships, elected to elected. But I would say if you have that relationship and there's a chance to just get to know them a little better over coffee or what have you, never a bad thing.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Hey, well, I will tell this about Doug. He is a great value to the city of Lake Stevens. He's a great resource, both strategic thinking and then tactical thinking about different, not only legislative ideas, but just ideas in general. And it's always a pleasure to work with you, Doug, and we're glad you're on our team.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Doug. This is Councilman Tajan. I just want to say thank you for all your hard work.
I heard a voice. Okay, let's go with citizens' comments. Is there any green sheets or anybody in the audience with citizens' comments tonight? No? Is there anybody online with citizens' comments?
No, but if I can just make one more plug. So if you're in our attendees, if you could raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to speak. I only have 2 citizens, but nobody's raising hand.
Okay,
Yep.
so we'll move from citizens' comments to council business. Council President.
Thank you. I'd like to, by way of reminder from our council procedures, council members about council business. Council members may report on any board or commission meetings or significant activities or other matters pertaining to city business since the last meeting. So I think we've deviated from that in the past, and so we're trying to more closely adhere to our procedures. So thank you for allowing me that. If we could start with Councilmember Jorstad.
Thank you, President Ewing. I attended the Board of Health meeting today and got some good updated data from Dr. Spitters. I sent it all out to all of you. There's a little bump up in the numbers, but sounds like folks are not super concerned and everybody's keeping an eye on where things are going and ready to spring into action if we need to, but hopefully this will just be a little blip instead of a big blip. It was also really great to hear. We had a presentation from Jason Bierman from the Department of Emergency Management and Executive Summers and the Health Office Administrator, Sean Frederick, talking about just the last 2 years and looking at lessons learned and the partnership that went into really managing this epidemic, this pandemic in our area. And just kind of great to kind of go back and look at the things we did well and things that we learned and moving forward. I also wanted to let folks know that I had an opportunity, along with Councilman Sam Lowe, to present Carlton Farms with a Health Champion Award. Carlton Farms was pretty instrumental in the midst of COVID in coming together with other farmers to really look at how do we support our farmers and farmers markets through the middle of the pandemic. And it was great to be able to do that, to recognize a business in our community. I appreciated that opportunity, so wanted to let you all know. Thanks, that's it.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Thank you. I don't know, but I was unable to go to the school board meeting because I had an event to go to. And I hope Angie went.
I did.
Good.
Yes,
Thank
also
you.
sat in as my alternate last school board meeting.
Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
And I so appreciate that while I'm goofing off, not doing what I'm supposed to do. I also want to thank Councilmember Daughtry, because I also could not go to the school board meeting, to the senior center board meeting yesterday. So thank you for covering for me there. My last thank you is to Caitlin, because she let me know that there was a Housing First Partners Conference this week in Seattle, and I applied for it and I got in, and it has been an amazing experience for me. As a volunteer at the food bank, I've really learned so much about our community. And Housing First Partners Conference come from all over the United States. And so I've gotten to hear from people from North Carolina, just saying, and also from Texas, and plus other places. It's just been really an eye-opener for me. Lake Stevens is not reaching that point of homelessness that we see in other places, but the price of housing is so skyrocketing. I just am concerned for the future. And the more I know and understand this situation, the better I will be able to serve the community. So thank you, Caitlin, for making sure that I got into that. And it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Frederick.
Thank you, President Ewing. On the 28th, I attended the Audit Exit Conference here at the city for our 2020 fiscal year. And it was a very good outcome. The auditors were overall impressed with the level of detail and care taken by our staff to manage all of our funds. As always, there's opportunities for improvement. Some of those I'm sure we'll be discussing later this evening. But overall, we have a great finance team. They do a great job in making sure that our books are in good order. And I thank them for all of their hard work, recognizing the challenges that go into not only the regular audits, but the much more complicated single audit, which is the federal audit for people who don't know, which is a much more complicated process with a significantly higher level of detail and specificity to demonstrate that those funds are being properly accounted for. And our team did a great job.
Thank you. Councilmember Daughtry.
I also attended the exit conference. Good job as usual for our staff in Bart Stevens' office. I also attended the Lake Stevens Senior Center Board of Directors meeting yesterday. As Councilmember Dickinson said, she threw me in that briar patch. And I had to answer to the, what are we doing with the ARPA funds? When are we going to get our $30,000? And I said, you're going to get it pretty soon. And told them what we have changed on what we're doing on the ARPA funds. And so I explained that all to them. So they're just waiting with bated breath to get their money. The biggest thing that they're trying to do right now is trying to figure out two things: how their board is comprised. They asked me some pointed questions about that, what they should do, because I'm on a lot of boards. And then they also are looking at different fundraising opportunities and trying to come up with better ideas for fundraising. So they're trying. I might have one for them. We'll see what happens. But that's what I did the last 2 weeks.
Thank you. Councilmember Peter Shagan.
Thank you, Councilor President Ewing. Hopefully folks can hear me just fine. attended the open house for the sewer district meeting concerning rate increases. It was about 10 days ago. I was surprised to see a lack of attendance. There was quite a bit of chatter on social media and so forth, and I thought that maybe there would be more of a discussion taking place regarding the increase in the upcoming increase in sewer fees, but there was only a couple of folks in attendance. So those rates do seem to be moving forward. I believe June 1st is what they're looking at. So there will be some increases in your sewer rates. Also attended the HART committee, which is a Snohomish County housing affordability group that analyzes housing supply, costs, things of that sort. My commentary, I guess, a little troubling in the sense there seems to be this divide or disconnect between we call it affordable housing, but there is a difference between attainable housing and subsidized housing. And it seems a lot of the focus is on subsidized housing. So hopefully we can expand the dialogue in that regards in that group. So if anyone has any ideas, I'd certainly be open to listening. And with that, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tadgett.
I have no report for tonight. Thank you.
I just want to thank each of our council members. I especially appreciate those who filled in for others. It's great to hear all the reports from people and the activities that are going on. And I know there's more that is going on that's not being reported on. So our citizens benefit from having such an active presence from our council members. So thank you. So I attended the executive meetings with the city staff and the communications director. And I just want to thank the directors and the mayor for their roles and what is taking place organizationally for the city. I don't know that council members or the citizens are necessarily aware of what's going on, but there's a high level of collaboration and cooperation amongst the staff and accountability. And so I just want to make sure that everyone is aware, or someone is watching this at a later time, but also the level of communication, that it's very much collaborative. It's not, tyrannical like some people think. And I think that's really conducive to high quality of work product. So I'm grateful to be able to participate in those meetings each week. Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, President. Got a lot on my mind tonight. I don't know how much I'll talk about, but I too attended the HART meeting, several meetings. I guess the one I would like to talk about is attending the memorial of Officer Dan Rocha. He's someone I knew. He was a colleague, and in conjunction with that, we had a mayor's meeting. All the most of the mayors of Snohomish County. And what came out of that meeting was a discussion on we've got to make some changes when it comes to public safety. When you have an 18-time felon who feels safe enough to wear a shoulder holster in the middle of the afternoon in a Starbucks in a huge city and be able to transfer firearms from one vehicle to another vehicle, we're broken. We're broken. Our prosecution system is broken. Our judicial system is broken, and we have got to fix it. And the mayors are on board with doing some fixing. When you watch a video of what police officers are now calling ping ponging, and that means you've found a stolen car or car with someone in it that you want. And so two police officers keep that car together, and that car knows they're not going to pursue him. So he ping pongs until he can get out of the grasp of the police officers' vehicles and drive away. And no one chases after him. No one has the ability to stop them. We have a problem with our public safety. So with those thoughts, I've formed a small work group of mayors, And we are putting together a platform of why why Officer Dan Rocha was murdered and what can we do to create fixes both in law enforcement, in our prosecution system, in our judicial system, and in our mental health system. Because we've got to get a hold of this. Our communities are not safe. So with that in mind, we will move forward and look at a platform that will take not only into the legislative session, but also in the campaign session, and make sure that those who are making the laws are making our community safe, not unsafe. So with that, let's move. I don't think we have any department reports. Okay, I would like to add, departments are doing great. APWA accreditation, moving along, great stuff happening there. Max is the leader, the banner guy on the front of the troop forward on that. He's doing great work. And then I would also like to applaud HR, Anya and Julie in implementing an electronic evaluation system that will actually keep track of our evaluations of our city workers. And what's really great about an evaluation system is it's not about dinging people, it's about developing people as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's a great thing that our HR department has implemented, and I'm proud of it. So with that, can we get a motion to pass the consent agenda?
So moved.
So I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Did you get that, Kelly?
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Got two
Councilmember
first and a
Daughtry.
second, so.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Ewing and then second by Councilmember Pojek.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And that is essentially our agenda. We do have tonight an executive session. There will not be action to follow.
Correct. So an executive session for property acquisition and potential litigation per RCW 4230.110 for approximately 15 minutes.
About 15 minutes. So what we do in this situation, we would ask the audience to clear the room so that we can have that executive session. There will not be anything to follow, so there really isn't a reason to stick around unless you want to hear me say the words adjourn.
I do.
So we're going to switch over
It's
to
actually
the
a word,
Microsoft
yes.
You
Teams
say
link.
it so well.
Can you do that? Okay, awesome. Yep. Did you unmute? Okay. All right, we're ready, Mayor.
We're back live?
Yep.
All right, so we're back live from executive session. There's no action to follow. You're going to motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second. I got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? None? All right, so with that, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourning.
You didn't want to do a roll call vote?
Do a what?
You want to do a roll call vote?